Hello and welcome to the Mel Carmine Show. I am your host today, Elisa V, and today we've got a very special guest, Razor Rick. Now, before we begin, I just want to remind you to tune in weekly every Monday. We do the forecast roundtable at 4 p.m. Eastern, and that includes, of course, Mel Carmine, Mike Barra, Laura Eisenhower, and myself. And we invite you to tune in at Rumble at XRPQFSTeam. And you can also find us on uh, YouTube at Elisa V Unscripted. Now, as a reminder, I want to make sure nobody forgets that we still can let you kind of tune in on what went on last month. Actually, we're going back 2 months now to the Quantum Summit 2. And if you want to still be able to see what happened and all the great speakers and the wonderful information that we gave out, you want to go to you want to tune into QFS. Geez, I just forgot the website. Okay, Quantum Summit 1776. That's what it is. And you can still buy into for $34. You could get the full summit and watch everyone, including myself and including Razor Rick. So anyway, without further ado, how are you? How you doing today, Razor? Hey, Elisa V here. Sometimes life can really be unscripted. It changes, sometimes quietly and sometimes all at once. Divorce, retirement, an empty nest, or a career shift. It's a lot. But you don't have to go through it alone, nor should you. As your coach, I'm here to guide you through all of the chaos and help you strategize with compassion, clarity, and a plan. You'll get real support, thoughtful mentorship, and gentle accountability to move you forward. Because this isn't the end, it's just your beginning. So why don't you rewrite your next chapter with strength and confidence? Drop me an email at elisamvalentino@gmail.com and let's schedule a free strategy call.
Gold and silver. Welcome to carminesgold.com. Don't waste not even a second looking. Cheaper prices just don't exist. How important is it for you to own gold and silver right now? What does it mean to me personally? There's an economy that's about to crash beyond what words can explain. In 5 words, I'm going to educate you on gold and silver. Are you ready? You need to own some. Simple.
As always, blessed and highly favored.
Very good. Very good.
That's my standard response.
Yeah. No, great. So I want to make this really organic today and just kind of jump into things. And I thought we would start based on our conversation off camera, that we'll just take a look at this subject. Jumping to conclusions, the next Olympic event. And I love it. I love that you said that. So let's just dive in.
Okay, so where shall we start? What's going on in this world can be categorized as just ultimately crazy.
I would agree.
Well, and a lot of people, bless their hearts, there's more and more getting involved, which is as it should be. We call it more and more waking up, but I tend to look for patterns and trends, and without any official college education, as it were, school of hard knocks here, right? So, and for some reason, I've been led to be very philosophical at moments when God speaks to me, and I put some of those things into memes, and to try to get people to think outside the box, break out of the matrix, as it were, all these little catchphrases that are out there. Perspective is of the utmost importance in what's going on and changing how you view this, or accepting what is going on in the changing world. And if you can't have objectivity, is coupled right along with perspective. Okay. A lot of people out there, bless their hearts, say they got discernment, or they tell you to use discernment. Well, I've run into a lot of people that say they got this, say they got that, but they talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk, because the walk can be difficult, treacherous. It'll alienate people because they don't want to hear it. They don't want their view of reality altered, and to take on anything you're saying or giving to them to add into their perspective, they don't want to hear it. They just resist it.
So you're talking about like people that we just have in our lives, or are you talking more specifically about podcasters, right? Because they have a bigger platform and they reach a bigger audience. Who are we talking about when we say that they're sort of this jumping to conclusions or over speculation?
Well, it travels in both lanes. The podcasters, there's passages in the Bible about this. Okay. I don't memorize scripture, and but the thing about it is it even mentions in there that teachers, preachers, people, and this can lend over into we're not going to get into the religious part because some people immediately shut down. Right. These things transcend both lines, whether you're a believer or even if you're an atheist. Okay, these principles still maintain. If you're out there trying to preach the gospel or just being a college lecturer, you put yourself in a position of accountability. So you have to be careful about what you teach, what you say, how you say it. I'm very cognizant of that, and I'm going to make a note. Nothing is 100%. I'm not 100%. Nobody's perfect. You're gonna slip up, but trying to get yourself to the platform of awareness that engaging your brain before you let the clutch loose on your mouth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying, whether it be me on the street meeting a random person, or I'm on a podcast and I'm on an interview now. So even as I'm saying this stuff as organically as possible, my brain is going ahead of me, trying to make sure I don't stick my foot in my mouth.
Yeah.
And there's some people that may think I have or did or anything else, and that's fine, and if I have a correction, I'll come back and correct it. But what I've been seeing is everybody's got perceptions, and most of our perceptions throughout our life are given to us by other people or information we've seen, the mainstream news, et cetera, scripture. It's a whole 9 yards. None of it is void of influence.
Yeah.
A lot of people, scripture. The Bible says this, the Bible says this. Well, yeah, the Bible does say that. And then my first question to them would be, what translation are you using? Right out of the gate, what translation are you getting that from? Okay, like we discussed on our last one, 34,000 translations. How do I know if it was translated properly?
Right.
Okay, then there's the King James only. I'm not trying to attack the King James only, but this is an example where people they've been given a perspective, a perception by, you should only be using the King James Version. There's a faction out there, I'll call them, that you shouldn't be using any other translation. But we went over it in the last one of who King James was, and how he adjusted the translation to fit a narrative where you don't question the king.
Right.
In a piece of scripture. So I advocate in that sense that go back further in time. Ethiopian and Geneva translations were done 400 years before the 1611 King James Version, of which we'll just go briefly into this, a passage that discussed God warning us about evil, how to avoid evil things, don't pay attention to them, don't listen to them, and which would include the normal devil worshippers and what, et cetera, et cetera. But in the Geneva Bible, at the end of the verse, it said, "and evil governments." Well, King James couldn't have that in there. He edited that out in his version. And then right after he was done with his translation, he outlawed the Geneva Bible. Back to the control narratives again. So the perceptions can be propagandatized, is what I say. And I give a little analogy that if I walk out here in my back porch and I look across the property and across White Hills, Arizona here, that I can only see so much. That's a perception and a base level perspective. Now, if I want to see more, i.e., know more, I have to adjust my perspective, which in this analogy, I would go up on the roof where the higher vantage point, where I can see further, and if I really want to see further, and then I break out the binoculars, you go with that. But there's a lot of people that won't do any of the research for whatever reasons. You know, there can be a multitude of them, whether age or they just ain't got the time, whatever they want to say. But they'll immediately jump to the latest news article or podcast or whoever is talking, and that'll be their thought right there. They don't go no further, which is a perception being transferred over to somebody else's perception.
Yes, yes.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. Okay. And the trouble with people's perceptions out there is they talk in too much of a definitive attitude, if you will, or verbiage, and then it's made so. There's this quote that if you tell a lie long enough, it'll become truth, right?
Yeah.
And that is propaganda.
And you know, just to add to that, I think on some level we've all been guilty of that. I would think that for a lot of people that aren't in the habit of really looking around and doing research and kind of compiling a vast array of different perceptions, you know, to build their own perspective, I think sometimes people are looking for definitives because it feels safe. You know, like you feel safe, you feel comforted. So, you know, we're not really putting people down for that, right? Because we all want to feel that we're in a safe position. But I think what we're trying to do is jog that muscle a little bit to say, you know, stretch it out a little bit more. And like in my own journey over the last, say, 6 years, I have listened to so many podcasters and so many videos, and, you know, I take like nuggets, you know, that's how I view it. Like this really makes sense to me because it rings true with my beliefs, my inner guidance, etc. And then the rest of the education that I'm giving myself by, you know, by doing the research. And so I hear people, you know, which kind of bothers me, especially in the truther community, you know, there's always this kind of one against the other and who's better and who has more information and who's more tied in. And I view it that I look at all of them and I say, you know, I learned this and gathered this information from this one and this from this. And then, of course, it also depends on where you are in your journey, right? Because you take information in that you're ready to hear, or that is the next step in, you know, comprehending and metabolizing a lot of information. So I guess for what we're talking about here, you know, the advice is really take it all in, have an open mind. You have to ultimately go with your instincts, right? Because we have that God-given gift that we've been taught through a lot of manipulation that we shouldn't trust. And really, that's our lifeline to our creator to really know within ourselves what we believe and, you know, what seems to make sense. So with this in mind, right? Are there some things that are happening right now out there? I'll call it the current events, for lack of a better word, but some of the things that we're seeing. One of the things I was interested in getting your opinion on, right? Because it was big news in the last couple of weeks, is this whole idea of the new pope, right? And so I have some really definitive opinions about what I think and what it looks like to me. But I'd love to hear what you have to say because, as we know, if we just go back in our very short history, right, 2017, 2018, we had Trump's capitulation tour. He visited some of the key areas and meetings, if you will, around the world. And one of them was to the Vatican. And during that meeting, when he met with Pope Francis at the time, there was a lot of speculation and discussion about how this was sort of bringing the Vatican a little bit to their knees and all of the nefarious things that they had done and been responsible for. And of course, that's tied to our money system, and it's tied to, some of the other things when it comes to the little ones. But for the most part, many believed at that point that that was sort of really the beginning of the end, or the end of, the Vatican as we know it. But now cut to the death of Pope Francis, right, in the not too distant past, and now we have all of a sudden this picture that Trump puts out of himself kind of dressed as the Pope, and then a few days later, a week later, whatever the time frame was, now we have this new Pope who happens to be American. Okay, so those are sort of the facts that have been fed to us, and we've seen in the news. What is your thought? What's your take on all that? Where we are right now with that?
That goes right directly back to jumping to conclusions. How perfect is that?
Yeah.
Because already right out of the gate, there's some video of this new pope and child sex charges. But that didn't come out for 2 or 3 days after he was the new pope. Everybody was already saying, "Oh, he's an American pope. He's a registered Republican. He's this, he's that," and there it is, jumping to conclusions. You're not sitting back and waiting to see how all this settles out. You just had, I'll give an analogy. Somebody just hauled by my house at too fast a speed with a dust trail behind them, and I can't see anything. I guess got this big dust cloud, right? So that is a perfect example, and I can even go back even further in my own journey, as it were. I had certain perceptions. They became once you start journeying with a perspective or your objectivity, why I tie the two in together, is whatever perceptions I have of a subject. Doesn't matter what subject it is, okay? We'll just use something that's really simple, okay? I like Harleys, okay? There are some perceptions out there that, and around certain people, you don't talk bad about. Harley Davidson is it. It's an American icon, everything else, which it is. Okay. I got 3 of them. Okay. But if somebody was to say there's this technical issue, that one was something's wrong with that model and everything else, some people would just shut down and say, don't speak bad about my motorcycle, my brand, whatever. We're just using this for an example, folks. Unless you're ready to be objective, to learn more, then you're going to have to set aside how you feel, your emotional attachment to this brand, whatever subject it is. You have to set that aside so you can accept whatever's being said without being reactionary about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I always go back, Bruce Lee, very philosophical. Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and make what's new yours. I'm paraphrasing. I probably screwed up the quote. But his whole philosophy about even when he came up with the new style of martial arts. It didn't just focus on Kung Fu, Wing Chun, Taekwondo, all these. He went everywhere. Fencing, boxing. He absorbed what is useful, and he incorporated that into his style, so you wouldn't be caught. Because and I took some jujitsu for a while, and it was totally circular like that. If they taught you something, and then many times we'd be doing some light sparring, and I say, but what about this? And he'd say yes. He says, because in a street situation, it's not going to happen the way you're doing it in the dojo. Right. Action, reaction. Taekwondo tends to be like that. They teach you certain things, but they don't, in the process of teaching you those things, get you to operate outside the box so you can be fluid and still defend yourself. So, and Bruce Lee has a philosophy, a statement about empty your cup.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Okay. This represents all the knowledge I can give you. You got a full cup over here. It overflows. Unless you're willing to empty your cup, you will not be able to receive new knowledge.
Yes.
And that's where objectivity comes in when you're pursuing a perspective and subsequently trying to break out of the matrix. I really won't accept anything that somebody says anymore. I want to know more. I want to know where they got that from. Why do you say that? And then maybe I can learn something from that. I call it. You keyed right in on it. There's always nuggets in every piece of information. You don't have to accept the whole thing, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, another cliche that's been out there. Yeah. I've got, like Mel, we've been digging into this conspiracy stuff for 40 some odd years. Now, until recently, some of those things I read about, learned about, and just said, wow, that's pretty interesting. Sounds crazy, but it's interesting. They're puzzle pieces that have been on a shelf for decades. And now they're finally starting to fit into some of the picture that's unfolding in front of us. So if people can't be objective in establishing a new perspective, whether it be politics or anything else, there's the dam is starting to break, and we can see it, but not everybody can see it. And this even comes down to Scripture saying there will come a time when they will not endure sound doctrine. And at such time, dust off your feet and go to the next town, because you're not going to get anywhere trying to argue with them or debate with them, because they're just not ready yet. They're locked in. Maybe they might never come around. I've heard people say things definitively, and then right within the same sentence or the sentence right after, they mentioned that, well, these are the rumors. Now, how can you go and say something that is definitive? And I'm not going to use the situation I got this from. You already know that. Because I don't want to put people on blast or anything, because there's too much of that going on.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be entering this frontier of humanity, and there's still a bunch of low-level infighting. Or I want to be the first one to expose this new conspiracy theory, and for a while that people were spending too much time going back, and it's like I had to say, we already know what they did to us. Let's start moving forward and coming up with solutions to correct what has been done.
100%. I just want to add too, which I find really interesting is that there's a lot of podcasters and a lot of people out there right now who are trying to bring the truth, right? They're trying to bring the truth. They're trying to enlighten. They're trying to wake people up, right? Let's just go on the premise that everybody's doing this for the right reasons. And many of them profess that they're trying to help humanity move into the 5D and get out of the matrix. But then you see them kind of operating from a very big sense of ego. And it kind of contradicts, everything that they're saying. And so that can be frustrating because you don't need to be the first. You don't need to be, the best. You just need to be whoever you're guided to be. And that knowledge and that information and that spirit from where it's coming from is going to reach who it needs to reach. And I think if people maybe had more of that, reminded themselves, because, I'm sure most people start with that desire to, help people and from a good standpoint, I think there would be less infighting because everybody would just accept that everybody's coming to this new frontier of, news and information with the ability, like it doesn't have to be one major person. It's like all of us, we're not vying for power. We're just trying to get our message out to whoever could hear. So that sometimes irks me a little bit because I'm like, isn't that the ultimate goal? We want to get out of our ego so that we can let go of some of that and allow ourselves to kind of ascend. At least that's how I see it. So I think that's why we do see a lot of the infighting because ego still reigns in many cases because we're also human.
Let's use that, just jumped into my head, the analogy of a hot air balloon. Okay.
Yeah.
Sitting there all gassed up, ready to go, ascend. What is it that keeps it on the ground?
The ropes aren't, you didn't let go of the ropes yet, right?
Yeah, that, and there's always sandbags around the basket
Yes.
too. Okay. Counterweights. Okay. So just visualize those sandbags, the ropes. Let's say the ropes are, boom, we're at square one in this whole journey. We let the ropes go, starts going up. It's only going to go so far because of the sandbags. Now, the sandbags represent the lingering perceptions that we've been ingrained in us, whether through school or conversations or anything else. And perfect propaganda technique, and I've been implementing this for decades. I'd be at a party and I'd say, what are the two things they tell you not to talk about at a party? Everybody knows it, but somebody will jump up and say politics and religion. Said, boom, they had you stop communicating from a propaganda. If I was a propagandist and we were trying to brainstorm what can we do to really control information, that was a perfect one right there. You got people to stop talking because they didn't want to stir up controversy. You totally adjusted over the decades and hundreds, whatever, how many years, you instilled an apprehension for conflict.
It's a form of censorship, really.
Yeah. Well, you're afraid to come out and say something because you don't want to be that person. Well, people who know me know they've already figured that out. I ain't gonna shut up. I'll tell you like it is.
I think most podcasters, right? We all we're putting out our opinions, and we know that you're going to have people that are aligned. Let's not even say agree, but they're aligned with the spirit of what you're saying. And then there's going to be people who are going to hate you because it triggers them, and maybe they're not to say that they disagree, but like you said, they're just not ready to hear it, to like open up beyond what they've been told or what they've internalized. So they're going to have a negative reaction. And it's the same thing if you go to a party, right? They've made us feel like someone's going to get angry, someone's going to get triggered, it's going to cause some kind of conflict, everybody else is going to be uncomfortable, and then you'll be the one to blame because you brought up this, you didn't stay in the box of keeping everything nice and neat and, predictable. And hopefully hopefully, more and more people like us are inspiring people to maybe get out of that box and say, well, what if I did make it a little uncomfortable? Maybe we could get a little deeper. We could have a conversation about something that might matter.
I would probably say, well, that escalated quickly. But did you ever see in the movies where, and I have a good example. There's this offbeat movie called Transylvania 65000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the
There's this
animated
mob.
one?
No, this is the one with Gina Davis and a whole bunch of
Yes,
cavalcade of
yes, yes,
stars.
yes.
Okay, remember the villager scene where they're going to go after the Frankenstein monster again, right?
Okay.
And is it I want to say it was Feldman, or that one guy with the big buggy eyes,
Yeah, Marty Feldman.
Okay. Well, while the crowd's getting stirred up, and then the mayor and everybody, they're trying to keep everybody calm or whatever they're talking about, and all of a sudden he's over here and he says something. And of course, those people right around him here, and then he jumps up over here on the other side of the crowd and says something else. That's a rabble rouser. Okay. And it's been done in movies, and it's been done in real life. You just say something and then you duck and you move, because people turn around to say, who said that? They, and all that exists there is the words went out, people heard them, and somebody says, yeah, what about whatever it is? And they're the stirrers. They stir up the emotions of the situation. And there are people
I
out
call
like
that throwing a grenade in the room and running away. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And I guess one of my observations, I see a lot of people, and you're entitled to your opinion, okay? I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Okay? It's as basic as that. But if it's your opinion or speculation and you're still trying to figure it out, don't present it as fact or definitive. A lot of people ask me about what's going on with this, that, or the other thing, med beds, the currency thing. My first words are, this is what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can give you. This is what's being said. So basically, I'm starting out from you can take this or leave it. This is what I heard. And then if after I say that and somebody wants to know how I feel about it or what I think about it, and I've had plenty of people send me something, it's like, what do you think? So I don't think. I've had this statement for decades. It's I don't think. Thinking's a waste of time. If you don't know something, find out. That's right. I've used this for decades. I said, like I say, thinking's a waste of time. You're spending too much time. The answer isn't going to come to you. You got to go. And I made this meme as truth won't be handed to you. It has to be pursued.
Yeah. So for
Too many people.
Yeah. So I was going to say, though, for people that are, because we get new followers all the time and people that are sort of, waking up and want to get different perspectives. So where do people, when you are presented with ideas or what you hear, then what's your method that you go out to try to educate, find out, and go out of yourself rather than think? Like, what can people do to expand upon what they've heard to see if they, more information about it?
Well, this is some of the beauty of keywords, so to speak. So you go online and you look for the alternative, the counter argument to whatever you're looking at. Somebody says this is good, type in, why is it bad? Because before you can establish a perspective, you gotta listen to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
That's the objectivity part. I mean, Otherwise, you're going off half-cocked and you're running down a road that you don't even know where it goes. You don't know if the bridge is out. So you want, and this is where my calling with the Lord as a watchman on the wall. I even told my my pastors that I have to go look at the weird stuff. And this was in front of a couple people in the congregation that he was talking to after the sermon.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I told them that, and he acknowledged, he agreed. I have to go look at the weird stuff, whether it may be biblical or by somebody else's perceptions, is that that's of the devil or anything else. I got to go look at it. Okay. There's this meme that I got from a biker group in New York City. They said some people want to live by the church bells. We're going to set up a rescue center 50 feet from hell. That's a frontline statement. If you're going to be into something, and you're going to pave the way, then be out front. Lots of people like that. Back in the 80s, I had a girlfriend whose father actually marched with Patton. Here comes in with a quote that I read once, is that 5 minutes of conversation across the table with a wise man is equal to 10 years of studies of books. When I came across that,
for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So when I came across that quote was a long time after I met her father, and he said Patton's men would follow him anywhere. He was in the front Jeep. He wasn't in the back. He never was in the back. And then now we know Patton is related to Trump and all that stuff. But
and how do we know that? I'm going to just flip this on.
Again, we only know that because that's what somebody said. Right. And there's the
a few people have said it, right? So now we're thinking, well, maybe, we can sort of look at that and then go deeper and try to find out how come they said that and where did it come from and does this make sense and do the pictures look the same, and right? So we've kind of tried to do as much research as we can on that to be able to believe it and then put it out there that that's what we believe now.
Or more importantly, you might not go to the whole belief level, you accept it.
Yeah.
Because then if it's getting a little overwhelming, you got to stop and say, how much is this really going to affect my life now? It's good to know that stuff. It's good to know that they've manipulated history books and tore down cities, Tartaria and all that stuff, and what happened to lost civilizations and everything else. But how is it going to change? Just being aware of it can change your trajectory in the future. So that's a good thing.
Right.
But when I came across that quote, I was living in South Florida, party days and everything. And this friend of my friend showed up, and I never met him before. And we were just all talking, hanging around drinking. And somehow we got onto the Kennedy assassination, and he said he was in the Air Force military intelligence the day that happened. I'm like, oh, here's that quote, 5 minutes across a table with a wise man, somebody who was experienced. He wasn't at Dealey Plaza, but he was at a base, and I wanted to know, what was that like?
Yeah.
Okay, what was that like when that happened? He says, we had a bunch of generals in from all over the countries, and, for whatever conference or whatever they're having. And when the word came down, as the word comes down, when the president is down, whatever code word they use for the different presidents, they went to the officers' club, where they were with their wives. They scooped up all the generals, not the wives, loaded them in a bus and took them down into a tunnel and they sat there. They had communications with their respective countries, but they weren't going nowhere until they figured out what just happened. I'm like, wow, okay, that's something. I met Robbie Knievel back in summer of '95 in Sedalia, Missouri. Okay. And this was, I don't know how long after he did the jump that his father tried in Caesar's Palace.
Right.
And I watched it, and the landing part, he went into a tunnel, which was part of his shutdown lane. Okay. And did I want to know what the jump was like, leading up to it and everything else and the feeling in the air? No. Said, Robbie, what was it like when you went into that tunnel? Because now you're going from sunshine to darkness, and how much room did you have? I mean, that's where the exhilaration comes, because you just made the jump, but now you got to avoid whatever's in that tunnel, the wall or whatever. I'm sure they cleared certain things out, but you got to only a certain length of time that you got to get that thing stopped, otherwise you're laying it down or hitting the wall or something else. That was my question, And
What did he
I
say?
met other, huh?
What did he say?
Said it was intense, I mean, but he, it didn't really bother him, He, when I told him I was going out to Vegas, which I ended up that year, Labor Day weekend '95. It's when I came out here, and a couple of weeks out, the Carcraft Nationals were in town at the state fairgrounds there, and that's why he was in town. The Easy Rider bikes, Grizzly Adams was there, Dan Haggerty. I met him, Do I sit down and ask the man for an autograph, which he had a table set up and everything? No. I go, Dan, what was that cocaine thing about that was in the tabloids years ago? He just kind of looks at me, and I said, because I don't like to believe that tabloid bullshit, I said, and how often do you have the man right here to ask straight up? And he started laughing. He says, that wasn't as big a deal as they made it out to be. I said, I didn't think so. He says the wife and kid did get arrested. He says, but my godfather is Robert Mitchum, which we know who Robert Mitchum is. Apparently he's got some juice. So he says, and we just laughed about it, And then a couple of weeks later, after the whole thing stopped, I'm in the after hours restaurant where everybody went when the bars closed at 2, had crawfish and a whole bunch of stuff, and place to be packed. And I come in, and all of a sudden I hear somebody say, Rick. I wasn't known by Razor just yet, but I said, Robbie, is that you? He was still in town. He says, I'll see you in Vegas. I said, okay. Never seen him in Vegas. Now he's, God rest his soul, he's passed away. Yeah. But yeah, you never know who you're going to meet, how they're going to affect your life. I've met some people that are very noteworthy. I've met some people that don't want to be noteworthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
The after hours scene in South Florida, stuff like that. I met after Hurricane Andrew, I met a DEA agent. I was working on one of the houses he owned, and he finally, I said, what do you do? And he said, I work down in Thunder Bay on the Go Fast boats. It's like, really? I already knew what it meant. A retired FBI agent that hung out at a bar my sister bartended at, told me, he said the same thing, and then he said, that's what we say,
Mm-hmm.
So I already knew he was something. And then he finally, I'm DEA. I said, really? So that's pretty interesting. I'm a retired drug dealer. How are you doing?
That must have been an interesting conversation.
Yes, it was a very interesting conversation. And And then he finally told me that he was one of the 5 hooded guys that escorted Noriega out of the compound when we extradited him to the U.S.
Oh boy. Wow.
And then my second ex-wife, after we split, I got in the union. I was in Kansas City. This is a little history of my life. Um, he She calls me. I had a 1-800 pager. She pages me. I call her back. It's probably about 1 a.m. in Key West somewhere. And I said, and she just got in a fight with him. She had her 17-year-old son with her. I said, don't. She said, if I go back to that trailer, I said, just stay right there. Hold on. Get off the phone with her. I call this same person. He lived in Homestead. All right, 1,700 miles away. She may have had some warrants. We didn't want to get that messing things up, trying to get her to a safe place. Couple phone calls back and forth. 10 minutes has transpired. I call her back, and as she answers it, she says 2 county sheriffs just pulled up.
Wow.
You know, the dispatcher, my buddy he said, I got a friend that's a detective in Key West. I'll call him. He's closer. He wasn't on duty, couldn't get a hold of him. So we didn't know till later the dispatcher didn't like female domestic situation, da-da-da-da-da. She dispatched the county sheriffs. They step out of the car, and the first thing they said to her, somebody called from Kansas City.
Wow.
I told her, I said, he may have convinced you that I can't get anything done. I said, but I told you I can get things done on either side of the fence. And there's proof right there. 10 minutes, 1,700 miles away. I got 2 county sheriffs at your location.
Yeah.
Boom. Yeah. Just like that. It was a lot of happenstance, but I said, maybe you ought to go back and tell him who he's messing with and that. So things will always work
that's
out.
a pretty cool thing. That's really cool. You made it happen. So we're kind of coming to the end, but I wanted to just ask you to weigh in on one more thing. Like you're obviously a very spiritual person, you know, you are very grounded. What are you feeling right now, like energy wise? Like what's out there, what's in the energy? Like forget about the governance, forget about the finance, all that, but like are you getting a feeling for what is happening here right now on this planet and where it looks like we're going and you know positively, negatively?
I think we're headed there positively. Just depends on how much of a rough road we got to go through to get there. Ultimately, I already know where I'm going, so I'm trying to maintain and improve my frequency. Like I say, people need to just try not to be the one that can be the first to say, I told you so. Okay. Just put the information out there, put it out there in an objective manner. This is all fluid because you could think nobody's got it all figured out. Nobody.
Absolutely.
No matter how much experience they've had, how many experiences they have had, that still lends to their persona, but they could be going off a little bit too much on a perception. The perspective part is you want a better look at things, go to higher ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you can get a clearer picture, clear your head, don't get sucked into the day-to-day. Everything's a grain of salt. I put a meme together once. It was all white. It had a little dot in the corner. And I said, this is a grain of salt. Then I found a picture that I put in there too of 3 cubes of salt or sugar cubes, right? And I put 1 ton on each of them. Said, stop carrying around this tonnage. It's a grain of salt, you know. Absorb what is useful, move on, you know.
Yes.
Because you're not going to survive fighting the current on all this, where you're just doubting anything and everything. If it doesn't resonate, just let it go. Maybe you'll bump into it later on. Who knows? But God's in control of this. He wrote the story on this. I don't even speak in the same manners that I used to, because I had to break out of certain perceptions that I was given and handed and told that this, that, the other thing. And I'm always questioning stuff anyway. I wanted to go back to the 2016 election, which I come to find out now, that was a military operation. They were going to come in and take Biden out, or Obama out,
Yeah.
in 2014 at gunpoint. That's when the Q movement really ramped up some more, and Caruso explained how clearer heads prevailed, and they said, let's go ask Trump. And that's how this whole thing happened. Now, when the 2016 election, I'm out there street ministry and everything, and Trump's running, and all the Christian community is all, yay, then he gets elected. No, we got a man of God in there. Well, you said the same thing about Bush. Just because he showed up in a church, photo op or whatever, they said the same thing. We got a man of God in office, all right? So I started watching people basically falling all over themselves about Trump is in, Trump is in, Trump is in, okay? I just sat back, said, well, let me see how this plays out, okay? Because there's certain perceptions of how the second coming unfolds, everything, the Antichrist and all this, third temple, all that stuff. I started watching it, and I'm like, okay, and it ties in with the capitulation tour.
Yeah.
And none of this is really off the table, mind you, people. Okay. You're running with this perception that all this stuff is really good, and it may very well be, but when you are taking a more objective look at it, you got to guard yourself against the alternate possibilities, because scripture, as much as it's been translated and washed, says that the Antichrist will be very charismatic. Okay. Then you see him go over to North Korea. I've never seen any politicians, presidents or otherwise, be so jovial and step across that line into North Korea. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I don't know. I just can't say, because that's something that jumps out, right? Then there's all these other things. And then as time marched on during his first term, I heard that there was somebody in the Trump administration that was negotiating a peace deal in the Middle East. Prophecy-wise, what's that tell you? That's also a piece of prophecy that the Antichrist will bring about peace in the Middle East. So then you got to be outside the box and thinking like I am right now. You don't have to be, but this is where I am at. I'm sitting back and just watching what's going on. And this is part of my watchman on the wall thing. The jury's not out on this whole, how the Antichrist is going to show himself.
Well, could it be that we already saw the Antichrist? I mean, there's
objectively, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you consider, like, if we do go back to the Obama administration, and now we know, well, any of us who were following things knew a little bit before, and it was conspiracy, but now we're seeing it's, coming out, if you will. And, we know the bad deals that were made. We know what was going on with the little ones. We know, and, there was a very charismatic guy. I mean, there was a guy who was made for a camera, to give speeches, right? He was trained that way. But I agree with you that, look, if we take the opinion, or we're looking at the opinion that Trump is here and he somehow, on the side of good, and we're seeing good things happen, and we're seeing bad guys come down, and we're looking at the EOs and what they've allowed to happen, and the military operations for those of us who follow that and can interpret now because we're armed with what different things mean and what the law of war manual really says, et cetera, et cetera. Then what we need to realize, though, and anybody who's of that in that camp, is that he is a tool, if you will, to help us, but he's not the answer. Like we now have the opportunity to save ourselves, to follow our own consciousness and believe in the power of what we can manifest and what they have sort of hijacked so that we manifest for the dark side. And I think the takeaway really is that if he is clearing a path, right, which seems to be, right, because we're looking at lots of good things happening. We can see the strategy of a military operation because everything is, you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's happening, right? And, is that a good guy? Is that a bad guy? Is, the bad guy pretending to be a good guy? Is the good guy pretending to be a bad guy? Like it's all this game that's being played, this art of war. But the takeaway, really, I think, and a nice way to end this is that ultimately we have to take back our power and we have to work on our frequency because ultimately, the more we work on our frequency, get out of those lower levels of anger and hate and lack and, um, you know, uh, just those heavy energies and raise ourselves, the more we're going to be helping the collective. They'll just and that's ultimately what our soul growth is all about. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that's another note that some of our verbiage and stuff, if we're not careful, we can speak things into existence, the whole manifestation thing. The frequency thing is really troubling me right now because some of the recent stuff that's coming out about the med beds is that you've got to. I've always understood that you should be raising your vibrational frequency, part of your ascension process. But what the narrative that's out there right now, right, wrong, or indifferent, is that if you go in, they're going to size you up. Yeah, they're going to size you up at the appointment. They say, okay, you should be very positive about this. This is supposed to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but some of the narrative that's coming out, and here's where it goes into that definitive land that and it's not stated this way, but I'll state it this way. If you go in there to go to your medbed appointment and you got a bad attitude, you may be turned around. Now, what kind of message is that to send to people? That just sucks the hope
Right.
right
And
out of
what does
people.
bad attitude mean? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, does that mean a bad attitude that your intent is to get yourself so that you're younger and more energetic and have a longer life so you could hurt people? Or you could traffic humans, or you could do terrible things? Or is a bad attitude, are they trying to scare people like maybe you're not as in touch as you need to be? Just normal human things that we're not at. I would tend to interpret in my way of thinking that it's the former. It's those people who really don't have the intention to necessarily do good, not necessarily someone who has not completely awakened, or maybe they're still, struggling with anger issues, or right, because we're human. So
And
that
that
would be
and
my
that and that's where the narrative needs to be a little more fine-tuned and definitive. So, I mean, there's people out there that are manic depressive. Their frequency ain't right and everything else.
right,
And
right.
aren't these things supposed to be straightening that stuff out? I thought so.
Exactly. Exactly. So again,
So,
this is my opinion. I think it's really more of a veiled message for people who don't plan to do good, whatever that means, where you're not purposefully planning to harm other people or do things that are nefarious to others and to the earth. So, but you're right, like people who it puts that seed of doubt or that fear, and that's exactly what we're trying to get away from. We're trying to get away from those things um so that we have more faith and we have more belief to, bring good things. So,
well,
but
there
it's a
there
great
goes there,
example of how people can go down that road of saying, well, I heard this, so now it's going to affect how I view
Or
this.
or we're trying to convince somebody that this is a good thing, and then they go, yeah, but.
Right, right.
And that ties in with my message God sent me. I put it into a meme, and it starts out like this. You know how they say, that's too good to be true.
Yeah, everybody says that these days.
Yeah. And when I'm trying to present whatever subject, in this case, any of this stuff that's happening, and then the message came on, it's like, you know how they say it's too good to be true? They've had your expectations pre-programmed from the get-go, because it's never too bad not to be totally consumed.
Mm-hmm.
People will consume bad news, it's going to get bad, it's going to get worse. They'll believe it. They'll latch onto it. They'll bite into it. They won't let go, because it's that old cartoon with the character Schleprock. Oh me, oh my,
Right.
with kicking rocks, head down, get your head up, look where you're going, so you're not tripping over any more rocks. Don't look back, because you ain't going that direction.
Yeah.
Okay? Push forward, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and get on with it. If anything's going to change, because you don't want to be left behind. You may lag behind, and there's going to be somebody that's going to turn around and pull you in.
Yeah.
I've told a few people when they've talked about, I hate using the term, the rapture, right? And it's even in the movie Left Behind with Kirk Cameron and everything. And everybody's, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm going to be raptured up before any of this bad stuff happens, right? That produced a bunch of what I call armchair Christians, because it's like, before all this stuff gets bad, I'm going to be gone anyway. So what do I got to worry about? So on and so forth. But Kirk Cameron's character in the Left Behind series, he was left behind. So I tied on to that. And, when people started talking, it's like, I'd say, I don't think I'm going to go. And it's like, oh, yeah, you will. It's like, you don't understand. If God leaves me behind, I'm not going to be sitting there saying, well, what's wrong with me? Oh my, what did I do wrong? No, I'm there to load the lifeboats. I'm there to bring the rest of the people, whoever. If God wants me to sit here in this realm, as it were, in order to do more work, I'm down with that,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not going to question any of that. I'll be like in that thing, I'll be the thorn in Satan's side.
Yeah.
He's not gonna, make me run or hide. That's it. I'm a warrior. I even put a meme together that how do I put it? I beat the drums. I'm a warrior. I beat the drums for what's about to happen. And people say, what direction? Where? Go down this way. Turn left, turn right, whatever. The lifeboat will be waiting for you.
Yeah.
I get them to safety. The Indian scout, as it were, that's on a wagon train, telling them, you don't want to go that direction. We got to take the wagon train this direction. And if the wagon master, why? Because I've already been down that road and I know what's waiting for us. So go this way. And there's always going to be some people that ain't going to listen to you because they know better or whatever. And at that point, you got to let go of the bike, as I call it.
Yeah. They have to
And
they have to go on their own journey, whatever that they're
I
led
mean, you,
to
te-
do.
you teach your kids how to ride a bike and everything. Eventually, you got to let go of that bike. You can't
Yes.
run alongside that thing forever, and they're going to fall. And
Yeah.
that's not going to be nice to see. And you just run over and you pick them up, dust them off, and
Get them
say, "What did we?"
riding again. Yeah. Well,
And
I got to tell you, this has been great. I think hopefully, we brought some things for people to think about and get the wheels turning a little. And we will get together again because there's always things to talk about. But thanks for some of your words of inspiration today. Uh,
yeah,
yeah. And I guess we'll talk
and
soon.
yeah, it's going to be troubling for those of us that are trying to establish perspective, get people to look at it in a different light and move forward, because they're not all going to, it's going to be sad to watch some of them go off in that direction. And all you can do is pray for them. And if they come back and say, you don't immediately say, I told you so.
Right. No, you have to lead with
You,
love. Yeah.
you say, are you all right? Let's go now. You know, and some of them might be shocked to come back to the crossroads there and find that you were still waiting for them while the rest went on. And, the true quality of a leader is to create other leaders.
Yes.
You don't create followers, So don't jump to conclusions. The whole Epstein names and files, there's people out there that they think they deserve this information, and they do, just not right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to upset the apple cart. People are going to scurry when they find out that, oh, my name is on that list or whatever situation. And it's a lot of you. If you watch there's a couple little excerpts out there with Bongino and Cash talking to that lady, and finally Bongino, he says, he spells it out. I got to push back right now. He tells her. He says, do you want it done fast or you do want it done right?
Exactly. And you know what?
Boom.
I'm of that opinion too. And I think when I hear, like both of us, we hear a lot of people saying, and like you said, we deserve to know the truth. There's no question about that. We're not saying that's not the case, but the bottom line is I think people are just so tired of not knowing that they're just fed up, and I get that. However, a little bit we have to have faith that these people are finally in to do the right thing and to take down these people. But like with any investigation or any military action, however you want to look at it, you're not gonna give information away before you can do it to put things in jeopardy, because you want these people put away and dealt with the way they need to be, not just to fulfill our egos that we saw them perped walk, and we have to be a little patient. We have to be patient, but not sitting around waiting. We have to be moving ahead and doing what we need to do to help in any way we can. And the people I think sometimes that get frustrated are the ones that are waiting for this day of reckoning. And it's not going to happen that way. It's going to be little bits and pieces that happen along the way. And we have to kind of do our part. And if our part is to enlighten other people, do our homework, get involved on a local level, that's what you do. And can't just wait for, the retribution day, because I don't think we're going
Well,
to have a retribution day. I think it's going to be little things a little at a time.
your desperation isn't going to speed this up at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even waiting for the Jubilee, desperation.
Yeah.
It's like plenty of people go into Vegas to desperate because they need more money. They're on their last legs or whatever, and you can't gamble with desperate money.
No.
You have to you gamble with money that if you lost it, oh well,
Right.
doesn't affect. A couple of the guys that I was listening to on a podcast earlier that had just rolled into, he did touch on that. The one guy was saying, well, if you or I did that, if you went up and hit a cop, you'd either be in jail that day or there'd be an indictment. They'd be getting you the next morning, and trying to question the elitism. And the guy did finally make a good point that they're trying to make sure that they're not going to get loose. There's some, and I seen a thing, they just recently got rid of it. There's something in a congressional order or something that makes them untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are there certain things that I think we could see without giving away the farm on their plan and some other things? Yeah, sure. Right now, I've stated this with plenty of people. We're going to kick off this over 1 year celebration. this coming weekend,
Mm-hmm.
I ain't celebrating. If it ain't done, I ain't celebrating.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I got nothing to celebrate about. Okay. Right now, tomorrow's my birthday. Thursday is the second or so anniversary of my mother's passing. Okay. So I could celebrate my birthday, I celebrate the memory of her and everything else. But as far as I'm concerned, if there's still work to be done, we got no time to party.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people have to realize is that our Justice Department was so corrupt that you don't want these people, quote, brought to justice because it's going to be a revolving door. So that has to be cleaned up before we can expect the outcomes that we want, right? I mean, you can't just snap your fingers with some of these things. And now they're more, if I say, if we look at it from the perspective that maybe they started from the top and they're working their way down, to get lower and lower at the local level, that's where they are. I'm hearing stories for the last few months how right here on Long Island, people are being taken out. It's not making the news, but from people who are on site, who worked there, who saw it with their own eyes, people on the higher levels of the postal departments are now being brought out in cuffs for their involvement in something that happened 4 years ago, the election. So it doesn't happen. There's so many tentacles that this affects. And if you want to do something, just follow it more deeply, do more research.
The complex part of that scenario is you hear something like that and it's like, we're not dealing with society 20, 30 years ago. Everybody's got a camera phone. How do you, as an operation, control that one person way a half a block away to where there was plenty of people in Dealey Plaza that they went to, give me your camera, to control the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that these days? Man, it's got to be crazy.
Yeah.
And how can you get it 100%? I don't think you can.
Yeah.
So that leads a little bit of speculation into, like, when somebody tells me something happened, I look at them and say, did it?
Mm-hmm.
Were you there? If you were there, it's a different story.
It's a different story, right? And that's what I'm going on, people that were actually there. But my point is that this is a very, it's a web, and so you have to make sure certain things are done before the other thing is going to go the way you want it, and
Yeah.
Gino's words are very poignant. Do you want it done fast or do you want it done right? Or whatever the exact words were, but that was the sentiment. So anyway, let's get together again real soon. This was fantastic. Thanks for being on the show as usual. And
Hey, if you want, we can do a weekly thing if you want. I don't care.
yeah, I
I'm
think it'll
down.
be fun.
I'm down. I mean,
And
Bongino even said what I've been saying for forever, and especially once we stepped onto this stage with this whole awakening situation, is it didn't get screwed up overnight. It's going to take more than a weekend to put it back together.
yeah,
It's a take on Rome wasn't built in a day.
that's right. And we're talking
So
6 years or even 4 years. Like that's not a lot of time. Feels like a long time. There's not a lot of time.
the only question I could throw at that, at Q and all the white hats and the alliances, everything, is why'd you wait so long?
Well, maybe they didn't. Maybe they were doing stuff. It takes a lot of infiltration
Yeah.
to be able to flip the scenario. And we know that some cases they couldn't stop certain things, but they might have lessened it because of their infiltration. And it's like you said, this isn't something that happened 50 years ago with the bad. This has been going on for
Okay.
centuries.
And on that note, what's being said is we're already back to a republic now. Okay, constitutional common law. And I've been telling people this. Why are we wasting so much time in Senate subcommittees and this, that, and the other thing? The existing corporate system, if it's done, it's done.
It's done, right?
Time to rip off the Band-Aid and just drop the hammer. You're done. First off, you've already violated your oath. You didn't certify your oath. And anything you've done against the Constitution, that day is the day you lost the authority of the position you swore the oath to.
Yeah.
Then I say, how far would we have to go back to Pelosi? The first time she did something that was unconstitutional, that they just, and then everything she's done since then is done. The corporate United States is where they voted 2 terms for the president. There is no more
Right.
2 terms for the president. It's anything filed or done under the corporation United States is done.
Yes.
As far as
But
I'm
Rick,
concerned.
you're absolutely 100% right, but how many people know that? So once again, we're back to the thing where when people don't understand what has happened and what the truth is, they freak out and mass freak out, right? Because if you consider maybe we're lucky 20% of the people know this, maybe it's less. So they're going to look at it as a, you know, like some kind of a dangerous thing, or an overturning of the government. Like they're not going to get it. So that's the frustration with people like you and I who've done their homework, who understand, who know, who keep, have a voracious appetite for knowledge and information and history and all that stuff. And the other people don't. And that's why it's going so slow, in my opinion, because people can't digest things. For them, it would be like throwing a bucket of ice on them. For us, it's like finally. And I think that's
Yeah.
the frustration that we feel. It's like rip the Band-Aid off. It's like, yeah, but what Band-Aid is that? Because people aren't even remotely aware of certain things. How many people really know about the Act of 1871? How many people know that we were a corporation? How many people know, that right now we're trying to clean out a system that's been so infiltrated and polluted? How many people even know about trafficking? They don't even understand the depths to which that goes and who was involved in that. So that's
Well, how
kind of
many,
what we're
just
dealing with.
one more little note. And how many people understand that they've twisted around the term of insurrection?
Right.
Insurrection is constitutional. It's stated right in there. When a government becomes tyrannical, it's the right,
And the
the
duty.
duty
Yeah.
of the people to overthrow said government. So right there, they all fell for that hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
But
And
we all know that they were infiltrated with look-alike Trump supporters, and they were, and then there's the conspiracy theory out that Ashley Babbitt didn't really get shot.
exactly.
That
So we
was a
don't
blood
really
pact.
know. We don't really know what's true, what's what's a psyop from the bad guys, a psyop from the good guys. And at the end of the day, I don't know if it matters per se. What matters is that we just keep our eyes open, our ears open, don't allow ourselves to just comply with nonsense, and to just keep our consciousness and our frequency higher, because ultimately that's the only thing that's gonna save us from the evil.
Yeah, and if we get too caught up with it, that pulls our frequency down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just reminded me of the '60s, all that Batman. At the end of the episode, it says, "Tune in next week for the conclusion of."
Right.
We can just put that tagline on this whole experience. Tune in for the conclusion, or to see what happens, or
Absolutely. Because it's ongoing. Well, I want to
yeah.
wish you a happy birthday. I hope you have a wonderful day. And we'll be chatting soon.
All righty, excellent.
All right. Bye-bye. Know that legal matters can be costly and stressful. Finding the right representation and dealing with high retainers and hourly bills adds up fast. But what if I told you there's a way to have legal insurance just like your health or car insurance? LegalShield has leveled the playing field. From just $29.95 a month, you get access to lawyers for personal legal matters. From traffic tickets to real estate issues or trust matters, help is just a tap away on your phone. Call or text 516-493-1742 and use code Elisa Legal to start your journey to legal protection today.
What if I told you aging could be reversed? At Staying Alive Wellness Center, a hyper-advanced light system in Cape Canaveral is no longer a theory. It's measured in real, provable science. An independent lab out of Houston, Texas has confirmed with conclusive data your telomeres, those critical markers of cellular age, are actually lengthening. Yes, age reversal. This isn't hype. It's real data, verifiable, jaw-dropping, and real innovation finally catching up to biology. And your body is ready to respond. Visit us at stayingalive.com or call for an appointment. Recharge your body at the cellular level. What are you waiting for? A more youthful life is here now.